I begin by talking about how becoming a father opened my heart. The Dalai Lama says he has no children, so how is it he feels a global compassion? He also points out that all the explanations focus on the mother towards her infant, not the father. The Dalai Lama also distinguishes between mental and physical levels of suffering, which has important implications for burnout. When I hear a child cry, now my child hasn't, or children, they haven't given the cry of a child in 30 years, but it reaches me. When I hear a child say, "Daddy," I turn around. Because once you become a daddy, you become, in some sense, if your heart is open, you become a daddy to all children. And that is an enormously important given, an advantage. So what we are seeking isn't anti-human nature, it's enlarging human nature. It's opening what's already there, because we are already the daddies and mommies of all children, unless we have been overtaken by greed and by power or by fear on the one hand, or by poverty and starvation on the other. Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But
one complaint.
Yeah.
You mentioned the daddy.
Yes.
You see, Kazoda. Once person become daddy, the course the compassion actually somewhere. So we never become daddy. So indirectly, you are sort of teasing us.
No, that's the amazing part. That's the amazing part, because...
But we,
yes,
you see, the Buddhist literature even describe all sentient being, mother sentient being.
yes, I know that.
But never say father sentient being.
Well, that's a prejudice we all have to live with.
Yes. Yes, that's very, very true. You see, the Kazore, one's own children, right? I think that's very true. And then the very word, mother sentient being. Even if he's a very cruel person, still part of mother sentient being. Very helpful to maintain some kind of positive attitude towards that. Right?
I agree completely. I do not think, but I can't be certain, but I do not think that these different targets of compassion within the family, familiar people, some strangers, all the world, all living beings, I don't believe that this is an orderly step, that in order to have stranger compassion, you must first have compassion towards those you're familiar with, because that's not what I've seen happen. I've seen people, adolescents, 16, 18-year-olds, make the leap to global compassion. No intermediate steps. So although these are separate steps, we shouldn't think of them as stages. You don't need to go through one to get to another. I made the distinction yesterday between proximal compassion and distal. Proximal compassion is, I see this woman's bandaged arm, and I want to say to her, "Oh, is it okay? You're holding it with the other arm. Is there anything we can do, because you might be hurting?" It would be even more intense if instead of smiling, you were every now and then giving us this kind of face, and signaling that you were struggling with pain, okay? And the response that one has when one sees pain, that's what I mean by proximal. That's where most of the focus in the West is, on proximal, and it's mostly on, when I see you suffer, it makes me suffer. It's not on, I go over and I ask you, it's not on the action that then follows that. Now, I don't know whether even in proximal, we'll come back to distal, in proximal, do I need to feel the suffering in order to act to relieve suffering? Is that always a prerequisite? That is, I see someone suffering, it makes me suffer, I then go and relieve their suffering. Or can I see someone suffering and go right, without feeling their suffering at all, go right and help their actions? And in past meetings with you over the last 10 years, sometimes you said one and sometimes the other, which may mean that you think both occur. But I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
As you mentioned, I think through intellectual level, you understand. There are sort of also the expression. Then some, not necessarily exactly same experience, but some similar experience you already have. So through that way, you can develop sense of concern.
But I understand that, but does that then free you from each time you see suffering, having to feel that suffering before you act to relieve it? Can you then, over time in the future, see people who are suffering, not feel their suffering, but feel a concern to relieve them without feeling their suffering?
Now here, suffering. Suffering is experience. So the physical, now Buddhist psychologists say the mental level experience and physical level experience. So physical level experience, not much sort of related with reasons. The mental level sort of suffering, very much related with reasons. So when you see some other sort of pain, you certainly reflect some kind of suffering, not physical level, but mental level, out of awareness. We are same human being or same flesh, so he or she must sort of cause the unbearable sort of experiences. That's you also experience some kind of suffering, but mental level, not physical level.
Well, that's a very important difference. And it may relate, I'm thinking of my daughter Eve, who you met,
yes,
who works in an emergency room where if anyone gets shot or stabbed or is in an accident, they get brought there. So when she's there for 8 hours, she sees suffering after suffering after suffering, many of which can't be helped. Now, the issue that she's very concerned about in her own scientific work is how to prevent burnout. Burnout occurs where people are overwhelmed by the suffering, or where they become not overwhelmed, but they lose the concern. And so they no longer treat the person with loving care. So if I'm understanding what you're saying, is that there's two levels. There is a physical level of suffering, but there is a mental level that would not make you vulnerable to burnout. So how do you learn the mental level separate from the physical level?
That's something different subject. Those great scientists
Yes.
who believe mind and brain is something same.
Yes.
That is very difficult to explain.
You caught me on that, huh? I explain more about this topic in my ebook, Moving Towards Global Compassion, available on my website, www.paulekman.com. All the previous webisodes can also be found on my website. The next webisode will appear 2 weeks from the date this one appeared.